Welcome to my channel, and enjoy watching. She looked like a grease-stained mechanic nobody noticed, until a single encrypted message turned her backbench into a battlefield. What follows is a jaw-dropping midnight extraction, a phantom operative, burned aliases, and a six-man rescue that shreds the rules of engagement. 3 years ago, I vanished into the motor pool of forward operating base Griffin, tucked in the arid sprawl of northern Kistara. My name, on paper, is Staff Sergeant Dana Wolf, age 29. To the rest of the base, I'm just grease. The girl with oil-stained hands and a knack for fixing trucks that should have been written off months ago. Nobody noticed that I never talked about family, that I always sat with my back to the wall in the mess hall, that I had memorized every patrol route before I ever turned a wrench. Nobody noticed because I didn't want them to. But yesterday at 1,430 hours, while I was elbow-deep in the busted axle of a Humvee, my encrypted phone buzzed with a message only 10 people in the entire world could send. Valkyrie Protocol, initiate. Package lost. Authorization Theta 9. My pulse never changed. I kept turning the wrench like I hadn't just been activated. They thought I was a mechanic. They had no idea I was once part of Black Dagger, a covert strike cell within Joint Special Operations Command. I had 53 confirmed eliminations, had operated in 6 conflict zones, and could disarm a mine blindfolded or turn a socket wrench into a kill weapon. Then came Operation Burnt Vow, a mission that blew up in everyone's face. Bad coordinates, bad allies, worse outcomes. They burned my alias and reassigned me to support for my own safety. On record, it was combat fatigue. In truth, I was buried, hidden, until now. The message was short, brutal, and surgical, just the way the black boxes that used to run my life always were. Coordinates. Unit designation. 6 assets compromised. Hostile numbers, 40+. Extraction not feasible under current ROE. Valkyrie authorized. Do you accept? I let the socket wrench sit in my palm a heartbeat longer and listened to the hum of the motor pool, generators, the clink of metal, the low argos of men who thought they knew me. Grease. Mechanic. Invisible. I breathed in oil and desert dust and said, affirmative. No one at Griffin knew about Valkyrie. It wasn't in any SOP. Valkyrie was a roundabout you walked only if the straight road had been blown to pieces and the people inside the wreck couldn't wait for a political debate to decide their fate. My supervisor, Staff Sergeant Halvorsen, asked why I'd need a convoy manifest at that hour. I told him a parts run to Kodiak, a broken transmission, a stuck differential, details that made sense on the paper and would get me out past the gate. He signed the requisition in 5 seconds and went back to his thermos. I always loved how the bureaucracy could be bent with a half-truth and a blank face. Under my bench sat a crate I hadn't opened in 3 years. If Greece was my public face, that crate was my private life. Inside, a SATCOM with buried channels, a rifle that slept in a custom foam bed, suppressed pistols, a kit of tools that were not for engines, demolition charges with safety plugs, med gear stacked in vacuum pouches, a packet of spare IDs, a compact jammer that looked like a tin lunchbox. I ran my fingers over each piece like I used to comb through target files before a mission. Ritual calmed me. Checks and balances. Weapon zeroed. Batteries swapped. I tested the jammer until it hummed their approved song. I called in on a number that wasn't in any log. Control, this is Phantom, I said. Phantom, your package status? Assets compromised. Grid provided. Hostiles, fortified, heavy equipment. Conventional rescue impossible. Static. The voice on the other end was that familiar mechanism, neutral, procedural, tinged with the kind of exhaustion that only bureaucrats carrying secrets show. This is off the books, Control said. No air cover. No official support. You go in, you are deniable. You accept? I accepted. I always did. The truck I'd been building was a lie wrapped in a lie. Outwardly, it was an M1078 recovery vehicle with a lift kit and a freshly painted star. Inside, under the floor, were reinforced plates, an auxiliary battery bank, a comm suite that could reach satellites on unlisted bands, and compartments built for things that didn't show up on inventory. If a mechanic asked why I needed so many foam inserts, I'd laugh and show him a socket set. They never asked twice. At 2,000 hours, I rolled out. Halvorsen waved me through the gate like I was going to fetch brake pads. The desert swallowed my taillights, and I became someone else. Jacket off, bun tucked under a helmet, coverall swapped for a suit that fit like a second skin. I strapped my rifle to my back, a tool that looked impossibly small and impossibly lethal. The hum of the engine matched the rhythm of my heart. I told myself it was just a parts run until the sabotage charges tasted like truth in my mouth. Recon from orbit and drone sweeps painted the compound, an old mining complex in the Karabash Ridge, reinforced and turned into a fortress. Towers at each corner, overlapping arcs of fire, a comms mast that blinked like an all-seeing eye. Hostile vehicles sat lined like teeth around a central yard. My brain cataloged every choke point, every likely patrol loop, every blind spot a hasty planner would miss. This place had been patched and repatched. The seams would show if you watched long enough. I watched. I don't like unnecessary killing. I like solutions. And sometimes solutions in my world require the hard metallic taste of silence. I parked 2 clicks north and crouched on a ridge with the world under me, listening for the failures they built into their security. A lazy guard, a generator with a thin fuel line, a tower whose shadow fell over the wrong place at night. By 2247, the plan was a razor. Cut their power, jam their radios, create confusion, punch 3 carefully placed holes in their control, and walk out with the assets. 6 lives were counting on me not to be sentimental. I tightened the strap on my glove and started down into the dark. I moved like I'd been kneeling in rubble my whole life, slow, deliberate, and always looking for the sound that didn't belong. The guard by the generator smelled of cheap tobacco and sweat. He was leaned too far into his cigarette for someone meant to be alert. I used a length of braided cord and a blade so small it fit in my palm. Quiet as breath, clean as intention. He never had the chance to curse. The charge I placed on the fuel line was little more than a printed promise, a shaped charge wrapped in soft foam so it wouldn't rattle in transit, a simple remote detonator that synced with the jammer I carried. Once the generator went, the whole compound would lurch into a darkness that favored a woman with night vision. I found my perch on the slope above the motor pool and watched as the central grid winked out, then collapsed into emergency lighting like a flock taking flight. Jamming came next. The black box that sat in my palm looked like a lunchbox because people expect lunches, not war. I keyed it and felt the familiar wash of feedback. The compound's radios turned to static. Their thermal cams leaned on warm noise and found nothing. I painted 4 precise nodes with small charges, then pulled the trigger. Boom crumbled comms, dead towers, a shocked chorus of shouting and boots. The sound of sudden panic is a peculiar thing. It lacks rhythm and therefore has no scent you can track. I slipped along the perimeter fence on my belly, breathing with the earth. 2 guards in post caught a glimpse of movement, and I was already in the shadows. 2 clean shots, 2 soft thuds, and the night kept my secret. Up close, death is barely audible. It is a small, efficient thing. I hated that I had to be effective at it. All the same, there was no room for drama. Inside, the compound had become a hive with the lights out. Men stumbled, flashlights cutting thin beams through smoke and dust. I had 3 charges left and a plan that required them to detonate in a precise cadence. Tower, comms hub, motor pool. The first 2 fell like dominoes. The tower shuddered and leaned, a pylon of concrete crumbling into a spray of rebar. The comms hub ignited with an obscene pop. The motor pool, my favorite, erupted in a molten rain of metal. Oxygen-fed fires made the night luminous and cruel. Chaos, by design. They came for a defense pattern, but there was nowhere organized to hold. Men ran like frightened dogs, tripping over burnt steel. Their commander bellowed into a radio that belonged to a dead channel. I picked off rooftop sentries through a scope that had once sung lullabies to guns. Each breath I exhaled counted. Each shot found a place to land and leave a silence. The prison block was my objective, a slab of reinforced concrete with barred windows and heavy doors. I watched 4 guards pacing in the corridor. I pulled a shaped charge and set it against the wall where mortar had thinned during construction. A hair trigger, a whisper of explosive, and a man-sized hole opened like an apologetic mouth in the concrete. They never suspected the breach because a breach in the wall is hardly a tactic a mechanic would use. Inside, the room smelled like sweat and old leather. My teammates, no, Not my teammates. The 6 men I owed were bound, bruised, and breathing like men who'd been given a clock without hands. Captain Elias Morrow's jaw was swollen, but his eyes found mine with the slow fury of someone who had waited too long. "Grease," he rasped, voice brittle but laced with a grin that belonged to old friendships. "Parking took longer than I expected," I said, because the ritual mattered. I cut bonds with the same tool I used on transmissions and took stock. They were alive, but weakened. I moved fast, patching wounds, stripping rifles from fallen guards, whispering instructions. There was no time for thanks. Outside, a cluster of fighters had formed a cordon, desperately attempting to recover control of the yard. "Can you move?" I asked, handing Morrow a field dressing and a rucksack. He tested his weight, misstepped, then stood. "We move now on my mark." We melted into the dark I'd made for them. Silent, quick, the kind of extraction that leaves few footprints to follow. We hit the main gate under a rain of bullets. A machine gun nest tried to carve us into the soil. I lobbed a grenade that had been hiding under a toolbox with a contempt for sentimentality and watched it bite into hot iron. The gunner went with it, as did the nest. Covering fire from a surprised Captain Morrow put distance between us and the courtyard, and we ran for the path I'd scoped hours before, a rabbit trail carved in current and memory. By the time we reached the planting where I'd staged my truck, the one they thought was going to Kodiak with a busted transmission, the compound was an image of apocalypse. Burning vehicles, men screaming into the dark, and the smell of diesel and metal. They looked at the truck as if it were a lie, which it was, but a useful one. Engine turned, we rolled. I drove like it was the one last thing I knew how to do. Fast, clean, precise. Behind me, 6 men carried evidence that the night had bent in our favor. We were alive. I felt the weight of it like a physical thing in my chest, and let it sit there, heavy and honest. We were not out of the mountain yet. The enemy was not a single fire, they were a tide. But for the first time since I'd heard the word Valkyrie, I felt something like relief. I had done what I came to do. Now all I had to do was get us home. We rolled back into forward operating base Griffin at 2:30, the sun hours away and the world still leaning into night. The truck eased through the gate with the careful arrogance of something that had already taken on worse than one. I parked straight in the motor pool bay like I always did, opened the hood, and wiped grease from my hands as if the night had only been a particularly messy transmission. They wheeled the 6 into the medical tent on stretchers. Faces I'd only ever known in patrol manifests stared up at me, blood and dust making faces I recognized in other men and women who'd been cut by war. Captain Elias Morrow tried to stand, looking like a man who'd been pressed too long under a heavy thing, but he managed a crooked smile when he saw me. "Took you long enough," he rasped. "Traffic," I said, and the humor landed between us with the soft thump of something human. He squeezed my hand once. Weak, grateful, and instead of more, he pulled me closer and whispered, "We owe you. All of us." I should have deflected, kept the cover clean, but it felt like too much to pretend I hadn't risked the night on a wrench and a rumor. So I let him believe he knew the whole of me. The medics fussed and asked their questions, what explosives I used, how many rounds, the exact pattern of the detonations. I told them mechanical failures, scorched wiring, sabotage. It was boring and believable. Lieutenant Voss, the lead medic, pressed a packet into my palm, an evidence bag of sorts with fingerprints and a tally sheet. "You saved lives," she said quietly. "We'll get this into the report." I nodded. I knew as well as she did that the official report would be circled by red lines and buried under more urgent things. The higher you go, the less you want inconvenient truths to breathe fresh air. For now it was enough that the men had clinics and morphine and functioning limbs. For now, that had to be enough. By dawn I was back under the hood of a refurbished MRAP, elbow deep in a gearbox like a penitent. The motor pool hummed with routine, rotations logged, radios tested, coffee drunk by the gallon. Grease. Mechanic. Invisible. I loved the ordinariness of it. The ritual kept me real in a way classified missions never could. But the world around ordinary had shifted. Whispers threaded through the base like a second language. Men who'd never looked twice at me now stole glances. I kept my head down. Curiosity is a dangerous thing in places like this. Answers tend to come wrapped in questions you can't ask without inviting trouble. At 0800, Major Harlan Grant stopped by for his morning rounds. He was a blunt instrument of a man who'd never been subtle, which is why he tended to appreciate people who did. He peered into my bay, watched my hands, noted the smear of black oil over fresh grease. "Wolf," he said, "gonna need a full inspection on Bravo 7 this morning. Heard it came back with new dents." "On it, sir," I replied. He hesitated a fraction longer than necessary, like a man trying to decide whether to say something that could upend a life. "And Wolf, good work last night," he added, fast, like a bird dropping a precious seed into an unexpected place. No ceremony, no medal, just a seed planted and forgotten. That afternoon, when the bass tilted into its slow lull, my encrypted device chimed. Small things like that used to make my stomach tighten. I'd learned the tone that meant authorization versus the one that meant something worse. This tone was a careful, familiar chime that had survived in a dozen lives I'd left behind. I stepped into the empty tool closet, closed the door, and thumbed the screen. The name that lit up was little more than a call sign. Control. The message was clinical and stripped of warmth. "Phantom, you did what was required. Package recovered. Observers cleared. We require a debrief at Secure Channel 7. Immediate." I felt a rustle of something. Pride, maybe, or the old adrenaline settling into its habitual groove. My fingers moved through the motions. Wipe, stow, lock. I answered, acknowledged. "Phantom out." The door of the closet felt thin against my back. I had fixed transmissions and motors and men. Later, I would be asked to fix problems that didn't have grease stains on their hands. For now, the night was over, and the bass was breathing again. For now, I could be just a mechanic. But the screen still glowed in my palm, a tiny betrayal of what I really was. A tool kept sharp in the dark, waiting for the next emergency to call my name. The debrief wasn't in an office. It never is. It came through a dead channel on a secure laptop I'd built from 3 different motherboards and a smuggled crypto module. The signal was just strong enough to punch through the perimeter jammers without waking the base's own security logs. "Phantom, report." The voice was clipped, faceless, the same tone I'd heard in safe houses, basements, and false consulates. "Package retrieved. 6 assets. 0 friendly losses. Hostile forces neutralized or dispersed," I said, fingers hovering over the keyboard but eyes fixed on the closed door. There was a pause. "Confirm no evidence of your presence remains." "Confirmed. Fire, confusion, and staged sabotage. What's left will read like an internal collapse." Another pause. Longer this time. "Understood. Well done." That was it. "No, thank you. No, we'll send a bird." Just static and a faint click as the line severed. I stared at the laptop screen for a moment longer. People imagine covert ops are full of fireworks and movie lines. In reality, they're like this, brief, precise, and stripped of anything human. I closed the lid, stashed the machine under a false floor panel, and wiped my palms on my trousers until the faint tack of adrenaline sweat disappeared. I'd spent years teaching my body to return to baseline in seconds. Once, that skill had kept me alive under sniper fire. Now it kept me from looking like a ghost mechanic who'd just dismantled a fortress. Back in the bay, the men from SEAL Unit Bravo had been moved to recovery rooms. Their gear lay in piles on tables, tagged for inspection. I slipped in under the pretense of vehicle damage assessment. No one stopped me. No one ever stopped the mechanic. Captain Morrow caught my eye through the half-open flap of a med tent. He was bandaged and pale but awake. When our gazes met, something flickered between us, recognition or perhaps suspicion. He gestured me closer. "You're not just grease," he said softly. I didn't answer. I just checked the tag on his shredded plate carrier like it mattered. "You came for us when no one else could," he added. "Whoever you are, I won't forget it." "Good," I said finally, my voice low and even. "But don't say it out loud again. Not even to your own men." His brow furrowed, but he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Understood." I left the tent before any more words could dig a hole deeper than I could climb out of. Outside, the night was peeling away. The first light of dawn sketched the edges of the motor pool in pale gold. Mechanics were waking up, stretching, fetching coffee. The world was sliding back into normal. I pulled on a fresh set of coveralls, tied my hair back, and sank beneath the hood of a damaged convoy truck, letting the smell of diesel fill the space where thoughts used to be. Each turn of the wrench, Each click of a ratchet was a heartbeat closer to invisibility. By 9 o'clock, the whispers had begun. They always do. Soldiers passing through the bays glanced at me in ways they hadn't before. Some nodded, like you'd nod to a superstition you're not sure you believe in. Some avoided my eyes entirely. Rumors travel faster than SATCOM. In a few days, the story would have grown wings, a phantom mechanic, a ghost rescue, something half-myth whispered about over poker games and midnight watches. And me? I'd still be here with my tools. Later, while I inventoried parts in the shade of the bay, my secure phone buzzed again. Just one line. Stand by. Maintenance role extended. New assignment imminent. I stared at it for a long time, then typed the only reply I ever allow myself. Acknowledged. I didn't know yet where they would send me next. Only that there would be another call, another impossible situation buried under deniable language, another night where a mechanic became something else entirely. For now, I was Dana Wolf. Grease. Staff Sergeant. Motorpool. For now, I had engines to fix and parts to catalog. For now, the ghost stayed hidden. 3 weeks passed. The base settled. I returned to the rhythm of grease under my fingernails and diesel fumes in my nose. The trucks whined the same way they always did. The soldiers learned to stop asking about that night. It was late afternoon when the black SUV rolled into the motorpool. Clean. Unmarked. No dust, no mud, no plates. 2 men stepped out. Suits with subtle creases. Sunglasses that didn't reflect. Movements too efficient to be civilian. Staff Sergeant Wolf, the older one asked. I straightened up from under a personnel carrier, wiping my hands on a rag I didn't need. That's me. We need a word. Privately. They didn't wait for my answer. I followed. They led me to the secure admin block, the one with no windows and a retinal scanner no one used in front of company. Inside, the air smelled recycled, cold. I knew that smell. Bureaucracy trying not to sweat. The room was already occupied. 1 woman, 1 man. The woman wore a charcoal suit with the kind of shoes that never touched sand. The man wore army khakis and a 1,000-yard stare. The woman gestured to a chair. Staff Sergeant Wolf, thank you for coming. I didn't sit. What's this about? She smiled like she had practiced it. We're not here to reprimand. We're here to offer something. The man beside her slid a folder across the table. Classified markers. Redacted lines. Satellite imagery I recognized. The mining compound. Pre-strike and post. A clean wipe. 40 hostiles. 6 Americans extracted. 0 friendly losses. Executed by 1 operator with 0 official support, she said, not asking. You understand how rare that is. I'm just a mechanic, I said flatly. The man smirked. And I'm just a weather balloon. The woman leaned forward. We've reviewed your record. All of it. We know what Black Dagger burned. We also know how you adapted. What you did out there, it's what we need more of. Quiet professionals. Embedded. Off the books. I said nothing. The folder remained untouched. There are problems in this world that can't be solved with battalions or jets, she continued. Too sensitive. Too political. Too fast. We need people who live in shadows and fix things before they break. You want to build a network? I said. She nodded. Mechanics. Clerks. Medics. Drivers. All with special training. Each invisible. Each placed in key zones where reaction time matters more than red tape. No official recognition. No backup. No trace, I said. The man answered this time. But the authority to act when no one else can. I glanced at the folder. You're offering me something I already do. What's different now? Support, the woman replied. Real logistics. Clean drops. Access to gear you'll never find in any catalog. And a say in where you go. I crossed my arms. Why me? Because you did it, she said simply. No fuss. No trail. You vanished after. Which tells us you understand discretion better than half our case officers. There was a long pause. I looked at the folder. At their faces. At the door. Then I said what I'd already decided hours ago, the moment I saw that SUV pull in. I'm in. The man smiled. The woman didn't. Welcome to the network, she said. Your transfer orders will arrive in 48 hours. You'll be assigned to a base near the Cormac Peninsula. Volatile region. 3 nations claim it. None control it. Dangerous place to be a soldier. Good thing I'm a mechanic, I said. They handed me a secure tablet, credentials burned into encrypted layers. No names, just code names. Targets. Protocols. Emergency contacts. and one line at the bottom. Fix what can't be seen. Remove what can't be known. I memorized it on the walk back to the bay. The engine still waited. The men still joked. Nothing had changed. But underneath my coveralls, I was already packing. 48 hours later, I stepped off the transport plane onto the cracked tarmac of forward operating base Calder, nestled in the thorny ridgelines of the Cormac Peninsula. The air smelled like rust, dust, and distrust. 3 nations claimed this land. None of them had the power to hold it, which meant it was perfect for someone like me. Officially, I was assigned as the new motor pool supervisor. Unofficially, I was here to be a ghost with a socket wrench. The motor pool was better equipped than Griffin's, a sign, I suspected, of quiet funding from people whose names don't appear in org charts. It had 3 full bays, a drone maintenance wing, and an attached salvage shed that no one else was allowed to enter. My orders granted me full clearance over it. That's where I found the real toys. Folded between crates of dummy batteries and spare axles were weapons cases disguised as hydraulic kits, encrypted SATCOM terminals rigged to look like generator monitors, and a crate stamped "Refuse" that contained an entire silent recon drone with facial recognition software burned into its core. I smiled just a little. This wasn't just a garage. This was a hangar for war machines that came without serial numbers. The base commander, Colonel Victor Larn, greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that didn't quite settle on my face. "Motorpool's been waiting on someone who gives a damn," he said. "You come highly recommended from, well, from sources who don't use letterhead." "I fix things," I replied. "You're going to fit in just fine," he said. The first few days passed in a blur of names, inventories, and the usual game soldiers play to figure out if the new NCO is a hard-ass or a pushover. I gave them just enough competence to respect and just enough mystery to stay clear of. I set up my own routines: diagnostics in the morning, fake inventory checks in the afternoon, real training at night. In a part of the base few patrolled, I built my own circuit course: silent disarms, target acquisition drills, close-quarter combat refreshers with weighted gloves. After dark, I trained like the missions never stopped, because they never would. It didn't take long for the first call to come. On the 3rd evening, as I sat alone eating rations in my bay, the secure device buzzed. "Maintenance request, package malfunction. Priority, red. Coordinates attached. Immediate action required." I memorized the numbers. They led to a village 30 kilometers outside the UN security zone. Too close to contested land, too far for official intervention. The package was an embedded analyst. American. Last seen observing a weapons exchange between rival insurgent factions. Intel said they were onto her. No official rescue authorized. This was exactly why I was here. I moved fast. Coveralls off. Black kit on. I chose my gear with the care of a surgeon. Silenced subgun. Modular sidearm. Lightweight armor that looked like a civilian vest. I packed med gear, comms jammers, burner sims, and one charge built to look like a maintenance flare. By 2200 hours, I was rolling out of the gates in a battered pickup that carried a false registry and a drone hidden under the wheel well. I drove slow. Locals didn't speed around here unless they were planning to die. The terrain changed quickly, from dry scrub to broken hills to alleyways where no one trusted strangers. My HUD flickered with local intercepts. Enemy chatter was light, but tense. Something was brewing. I parked the truck in the shell of an abandoned service station and moved on foot. The analyst had last pinged from a 2-story brick ruin halfway down a narrow street patrolled by a militia known for hating outsiders more than they hated each other. I watched for 10 minutes from a rooftop across the way. Movement. Heat signatures. She was alive, barely. 3 men stood guard. Arrogant. Loose trigger discipline. I'd seen it before. I waited until one lit a cigarette and another moved to take a leak. That was enough. I dropped the first with a suppressed round to the base of the skull. The second turned and caught a flashbang to the face. The third tried to run. He didn't make it far. Inside, the analyst was tied to a radiator, bruised and barely conscious. She looked up at me like I was the last light she'd ever see. "Who?" she whispered. "Mechanic," I said. I cut her loose, checked her vitals, injected a stabilizer, and lifted her to her feet. She winced but nodded. "I can move." "Good," I replied. "Because we're not staying." We exited through the alley, avoiding light, using the shadows like tools. Halfway to the truck, I heard shouts. Then engines. Reinforcements. I grabbed my last card, the fake flare, tossed it behind a barrel. When it went off, it blinded half the block in a flood of white noise and pulsed EMP. We moved. We made the truck just as bullets started searching for us. I gunned it out of the alley, dipped into the creek bed, and drove without lights until we were 3 kilometers clear. The analyst leaned back, bleeding but breathing. You're not just motor pool. No, I agreed. But that's what the paperwork says. We reached the base at 3:12. No fanfare. No debrief. She vanished into medical. I rolled into the garage like I'd been out scrounging tires. By the time the sun rose, I was back under the belly of a Humvee, wrench in hand, fixing the kinds of problems people could see. The other ones? Those would wait until the next call. The analyst's name was Camille Reyes. She'd been tracking insurgent weapons routes across the Cormac interior under the guise of NGO logistics. She should have had backup. She didn't. That's why I was called. She vanished into medical after I brought her in, and I expected that to be the end of it. One ghost rescuing another. No names, no files. But 3 days later, she found me. I was in Bay 2, pretending to care about a faulty alternator, when she walked up with a limp and eyes that had seen enough. You saved my life, she said simply. I kept my eyes on the wrench. I fixed a problem. That's all. She smiled faintly. Then maybe you'll want to fix another. I paused. She handed me a small device, looked like a thumb drive, but heavier, reinforced. Encrypted logs from the field. I wasn't just tracking shipments. I was tracking patterns. And I found something bad. Define bad. 3 different militias are receiving identical tech. High-end surveillance gear. American make. But the serials? Scrubbed. Ghost inventory. That got my attention. This goes higher than local black markets, she continued. Somebody with access is arming multiple sides and watching how they fight. Field testing, I muttered. She nodded. And if they know I survived, they'll try again. I pocketed the drive without another word. She didn't ask where it would go. She knew. That night, I cracked the encryption from a system I built inside a gutted ECM terminal. The files weren't just bad, they were nuclear. Shipment logs with partial DoD codes. Internal memos from a private contractor marked for review only. And satellite snapshots that showed American eyes watching insurgents kill each other using gear we were supposed to have destroyed years ago. The whole thing stank of sanctioned deniability. Use the Cormac chaos as a sandbox. See what gear works. See what tactics fail. No oversight. No blowback. Just plausible deniability and a new weapons market to feed. It wasn't just unethical. It was personal. I flagged the intel for uplink to control, but before I could transmit, the secure phone buzzed. Do not transmit. Compromised channel. Stand by for direct contact. I swore under my breath and killed the signal. Someone knew I had the drive. 20 minutes later, I spotted movement near the outer fence. Subtle. Too clean for local militia. That meant one thing. Someone was trying to erase the evidence. And me. I went dark. I powered down everything non-essential, pulled my emergency sat hopper, and crawled into the shadow beneath an MRAP where I'd stashed my go bag months ago. Body armor, suppressed SMG, thermal scrambler, and a burner tablet with one uplink left. I activated the flare suppressor on the motor pool perimeter, plunging the compound into shadow. And then I hunted them. 3 operators. Civilian gear, military movement. I watched through thermal as they moved in a V formation, clearing corners with textbook efficiency. But they weren't here for a sweep. They were here for one person. Me. I let the first one pass. A blade to the neck. Clean. Silent. The second saw the body and froze, just long enough for me to end him with a single shot to the temple. The third, well, he was smart. He tried to exfil. That's how I knew he was the one with the comms gear. I intercepted him near the fuel depot, jammed his radio, and hit him with a flash before he could adapt. I left him breathing, just long enough to ask, "Who sent you?" He didn't answer, but the tracker in his belt told me everything I needed. His extraction team wasn't military. It was private, and the uplink they used? It tied back to a shell company registered in the Caymans. Private. Funded. Off record. I called control the old way. Burst code. Analog burst from a rig I'd built into the fuel station's weather console. The reply came in less than a minute. Secure the data. Exfil in 36 hours. Alternate transport in play. Trust no one. So I burned the bodies. I torched the data terminal they'd tried to breach. and I prepped the drive for a dead drop outside the base perimeter. Camille Reyes disappeared that night. No trace, no exit logs. Just a note on my desk the next morning. Thanks for fixing things. I'll try not to break anything else. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just went back to work. Because now I knew the war in Cormac wasn't just about territory or factions. It was about testing what the world would tolerate. And I wasn't going to let them find out. The extraction clock was ticking. I had 36 hours to disappear or be erased. I kept my movements normal. No sudden changes. Fixed what needed fixing. Laughed at bad jokes from drivers who didn't know what death smelled like. But every moment, I was planning. The drive was hidden inside a decoy torque converter, buried under parts no one would question. My exfil route passed through a buried culvert near the fuel dump, a forgotten maintenance tunnel I had mapped the week I arrived, just in case. That night, the signal came in, a shortwave tone, followed by one sentence scrambled across encrypted text. Courier inbound. Blackbird package. Confirm presence. I tapped out the acknowledgement and activated a beacon so low-powered it could only be picked up within 50 meters. Then I waited. At 0240 hours, a cargo drone buzzed low over the compound. Civilian shell, military payload. It dropped one box, no chute, into the empty waste pile beyond the motor pool fence. I retrieved it 2 minutes later. Inside, new credentials, a forged transfer order, a thumb drive with routing intel, and a patch I hadn't seen in years. It was black with a silver wrench crossed over a dagger. Mechanic. Operator. Ghost. My orders were simple. Leave behind all direct connections. Deliver the package to a location 600 kilometers north and await further assignment. But there was one more thing, a list. Names. Locations. Supply chains. All tied to the ghost weapons pipeline Camille had uncovered. It wasn't just one shell company. It was a network, quietly enabling war to evolve faster than diplomacy ever could. And we'd been deployed not just to stop it. We were to dismantle it. I wasn't alone anymore. The tablet contained secure entries from other operators like me, motor pool sergeants in South Sudan, cooks in Montenegro, drivers in disputed ports off the Eastern Corridor. Each had a mission. Each had a trail. Each one was just waiting for someone to say go. That someone, apparently, was me. I transmitted the Blackbird package via microburst from a rigged weather station tower at 0317 hours. The signal vanished into the sky. The data was away. If they traced it, all they'd find was burned circuitry and a malfunctioning wind gauge. I torched my emergency gear, melted my signature weapon, and re-entered the compound just before dawn. The transfer orders came through 20 minutes later. Officially, I was being reassigned to a logistics unit in the Shivari Gulf. New motor pool, new ID, new set of problems. Unofficially, the war had changed, and I had become part of the answer. Before I left, I walked the perimeter one last time. Every bolt I'd tightened, every rig I'd hidden, every trace of myself, gone. Staff Sergeant Dana Wolf had never existed here. And when the next mechanic showed up, they'd have no idea that a ghost had kept the wheels turning and the enemy bleeding just beneath their feet. At 0500, I boarded the outbound flight with nothing but a duffel and a scar under my collarbone that hadn't healed since burnt vow. I didn't look back. There were more fires to extinguish, and I had just become the spark. Shivari Gulf wasn't a battlefield. It was a powder keg with 2 mini-matches nearby. AUS, naval logistics base nested between disputed oil routes and roving mercenary fleets. The kind of place where problems didn't start with bullets, but always ended with bodies. I arrived as a transfer no one requested, slid into a maintenance unit that barely functioned, and went straight to work rebuilding their fleet. On paper, I was Staff Sergeant Eliza Kane now, motor pool supervisor, experienced in Middle Eastern convoy logistics, recently reassigned from Kestara due to restructuring. The cover was clean, the paperwork flawless. The mission? Still murky, but I didn't need a full brief. I could smell the tension from the moment I stepped into the garage. Broken communications trucks that weren't actually broken. Supply manifests that didn't match their delivery routes. And worst of all, civilian contractors with military posture loitering too long by satellite relays. There were ghosts here too, but not like me. These weren't mechanics. These were watchers. And they were watching the wrong side. I tapped into the secured channel I'd been assigned, the one hidden inside a fleet diagnostic terminal. There were already messages waiting. Operator BR-11 reported missing. Suspected abduction. Last ping, Gulf Route 3. Field audit shows unregistered transponder activity matching known GhostNet traffic. Authorization, open hand. Fix the system. In GhostNet parlance, open hand meant no restrictions. Solve the problem however you see fit. Just don't leave evidence. It was the kind of mission that got people buried in unmarked files. I started small. Quiet checks on maintenance logs. Conversations with crew chiefs pretending not to notice the missing drones. Then a field recon. Just me and a supposedly broken satellite truck. It led me to Gulf Route 3. There, hidden behind a broken coastal pipeline, I found it. A compound that didn't exist on maps. Inside, crates marked as food aid from humanitarian groups that hadn't operated here in 2 years. Containers with biometric locks. And, hidden in a back room, a comm station transmitting encrypted bursts to 3 continents, none of which pointed toward any Allied base. GhostNet had become something else. A rogue limb. Hijacked. This wasn't just black market funneling. It was surveillance laundering. They weren't just watching enemies. They were watching us. I took photos, pulled hard drives, planted malware to wipe every system at midnight. And then I waited. The strike came at 2,314 hours. 3 hostiles. Suppressed rifles. Clean angles. They breached my temporary safe house like they'd rehearsed it. But they hadn't rehearsed for me. The first died before he cleared the doorway. The second tried to flank, but caught a ceramic spike trap I'd hidden in the vent. The third begged. I gave him one question. Who are you working for? His answer was a name I hadn't heard in 5 years. A man buried with Operation Burnt Vow. Or so I thought. A deep player. Someone who knew how to disappear in the alphabet soup of U.S. and private intelligence. And if he was alive, if he was repurposing GhostNet into a global shadow network, then this was just the beginning. I transmitted the data. Encrypted, hidden inside a satellite's thermal routine. Gone in under 5 seconds. The reply came an hour later. Package received. Rogue asset confirmed. Stand by for assembly. Assembly. That meant one thing. We weren't operating solo anymore. The mechanics, the cooks, the drivers, just a clerk, scattered across the world. We were forming a unit. Off the books. Off the grid. But for the first time, coordinated. A ghost battalion of problem solvers for a world running out of rules. I stared at the wrench hanging over my new workbench. Still smudged from fixing the base commander's Jeep. Still warm from hiding the deadliest weapon cache on this base. The wrench and the dagger. 2 tools. 1 mission. Keep the machine running. And when something breaks beyond repair, take it out quietly. I rolled my sleeves, checked my gear, and prepped for whatever came next. Because when the next mission drops, and it will, it won't be a matter of war or peace. It'll be a matter of maintenance. And I always fix what's broken. Permanently. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.